Switzerland school. So let us know that, I mean, this obviously, as you've mentioned, this is a school in Rwanda. And how are you the things that you've just mentioned, how are you doing those things to ensure that a student who walks through the corridors of that school and by the time they come out are really global ready?
Mm-hmm. I think the focus starts on creating an environment that's truly focused on the individual. So I always say there are basically two major dimensions to a child's education, the individual dimension and the social dimension. We have a lot of questions in our own head. We all have our own learning preferences. We all have our interests and our goals. We all have our limitations and our needs as well. But even those of us who think that we're the strongest type of student and who may like working independently all of the time, we have to acknowledge that learning is a social process. It takes place in dialogue. It takes place in common action. It takes place in community engagement. And so learning is fundamentally a social process. We construct our understanding of the world around us by our interactions with the environment around us. And of course, the environment around us includes the people around us. And having new perspectives and bouncing ideas off each other can help us construct our own understanding of the world around us. So I would say a school, and our school does this very intentionally, needs to focus on those two poles, the individual and the social or collaboration. And so we frame the educational day around that. So for example, we start the week with every student meeting with their own scholastic mentor. They have, I say scholastic instead of academic because I think school has so many more dimensions than just the academic. And so they have a mentor who's basically responsible for their development together with them. Of course, the student themselves bears the primary responsibility, and we as the village all bear the responsibility. But the mentor is there to look at, they're assigned to 10 children. Okay? These 10 children they know especially well. They teach them, and so the student has 2 hours of contact time with their mentor built into their schedule, and significant opportunities each day to check in with their mentor if they need that. The mentor looks at what their interests are, what their goals are, how they're approaching their learning, helps them to set SMART goals, helps them to develop their metacognitive competence, so their strategic ability to reflect and to navigate their learning, to take ownership for their learning. And this is done through a process that feels authentic, but very intentionally uses metacognitive practice and reflective learning practices to coach these learners. So essentially the mentors are the learners' coaches. That's one of the ways we do that personalized dimension of learning. It's not the only one. The second is collaboration, the social dimension of learning, in so many realms, in so many other dimensions that students will experience throughout their learning day. But let me give you one example. In our classes that we call seminars, cooperative learning is the default setting. So the default setting in most schools that you visit, by the way, even some of the best international schools or the elite schools, is a classroom that still remains rather teacher-centered, where the teacher is usually found in what's called the front of the classroom, where the students are focusing their attention on the teacher, and then the teacher will occasionally say, okay, let's break out into groups and discuss that, but we'll come back. Well, that has some of its merits, and one can do it some of the time, but I find that the more teacher-centered my classroom is, even though I think of myself as a very dynamic and engaging educator who is a good lecturer, I find that my kids disengage. And so what you need is an active classroom where learners can't just sit there passively, where they have to interact with their peers. And so cooperative learning as the default setting, have a 1-hour lesson or a 45-minute or a 90-minute lesson, and at the end of the lesson, make sure that a group of students has to produce a certain product that has to do with a learning goal, and make sure that that process is so structured that each student has to participate for that learning goal to be achieved. For example, through role assignment, through positive interdependence within those experiences. But a classroom that's abuzz with interaction, that's alive with conversation, that's alive with learning by doing, that's another approach you'll find. And I think I would add one more thing just so this answer to this question doesn't become too long, because I could talk about this all day, what our school can look like. But we are a school with a special STEM focus, and so you're going to see the laboratories as really key learning spaces, not as a place where a teacher lectures, it just looks like a laboratory, but it becomes a classroom, not as a space where the kids will then go to the lab once every 2 weeks or once a month to apply what they've been learning in the classroom, but rather as the space or the environment in which they're learning science. And by the way, let's extend that outside. We're building an agroforestry site on our campus. We have let the students create biohabitats. So the 53 hectares of our campus, those are also part of the learning environment. And I think that that's what you'll see at our school. You'll see laboratories, you'll see learning studios, you'll see design studios and workshops, you'll see art studios, you'll see the composting areal. So you have all these areas that are the new classroom, and the classroom is not just the classroom. And by the way, beyond the campus, in community engagement activities, in service learning opportunities, in entrepreneurial gatherings where our students are interacting with community experts, where they're interacting with real entrepreneurs, visiting businesses, evaluating small businesses, and things like this. This is the kind of approach to education that you'll see. And I think that what is unique about entire Louise Lund School, because a lot of schools are aspiring to do that and are doing it partially. I think we're doing it to a really great extent, to a really significant extent. But I think this special combination of the International Baccalaureate programs and the IB curriculum with this STEM focus, which we call IB plus STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, this is unique. That we're taking the top talents from around Rwanda, and hopefully soon from around East Africa and across Africa. In fact, we've just had groups in for a coding and robotics camp from Cameroon, from Nigeria, from Ghana. So we do want to expand. We want parents in Kenya to be bold enough to try this approach to education with us. But I think this is really the way that we're pushing the boundaries to make learning more authentic, to make it student-centered, and to take it beyond those four walls of the rectangular classroom, which is so 19th century. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, I mean, just to look at then who